So today we'll learn about the tribal people. So there was several tribes that was in India. Now we'll learn about this. The small paragraph we'll learn. Okay. So a man named Birsa was seen roaming about the palace and the villages of Chotanagpur in Bihar. People said that he had miraculous powers. He could cure all diseases and multiply grain. Birsa himself declared that God had appointed him to save his people from travel, free them from slavery or the Dikus. Who were they? They were believing that Bhagavan had come to solve all their problems. Birsa was born in the family of the Mundas, a tribal group who lived in Chotanagpur, but his followers included other tribes such as the Santals and the Oryans. All of them had different ways were unhappy with the challenge facing by them. They were facing under the British rule. The familiar ways of life seemed to be disappearing. Their livelihoods were under threat, and their religion appeared to be in danger. So what did they do? Now let's see who was this Vishnu and who was this Mundas and etc. So how did the tribal groups live? Some of them were Jhum, some of them were hunter-gatherers, some of them were hated animals, some of them took to settle cultivation. So Jhum cultivators, what were they? We'll need to learn this. Jhum cultivation is shifting cultivation, okay? So what did they do? They planted crops in one land and you don't think of an event being an planting crops need many such like many minerals. Okay, so when the minerals extinguished in that land, they followed the other land. Again, they moved to this land till it regained again that land, this land. Okay, so this cycle continued, and these were known as the Jhum cultivators. Next, hunter gatherers. Corns, where the hunter gatherers they hunted and gathered. They hunted meat and gathered fruits and roots to eat, just like the early humans herded animals. So they have this tribal groups. They herded animals. One Gujar of the Panjar Hills and the Gardis in the Kudu were shepherds. So these were shepherds, and Bakralis of Kashmir were goats. Okay. Now settle cultivation. Before the 19th, so they were settling down to one place. Some of them Mundas of Chotnagpur settled down, and then they did cultivation. All these things. Now all this tribal groups, the British officers saw these tribal groups like Dons and Santals are more civilized than the hunter-gatherers of the shifting cultivation. Those who lived in the forest were considered to be wild and savage. They needed to be settled and civilized. So what did they do? How did colonial rule affect the tribal lives? What happened to the tribal chiefs? What happened to the shifting cultivations? Forest laws and their impacts. The problem with the trade, okay, and the search for work. We'll look to them. So what happened to these tribal chiefs? Now they were important people of the tribes, you know that? So their economic power and their right to administer and they had right to control their territories. So they had their own police, they had their own local rules, okay? Under the British rule, all these functions changed considerably. They were only allowed to keep their land titles over a cluster of villages and rent out their lands, but lost administrative power and were forced to follow the laws made by the British officials in India. They thought it will civilize them. They also paid tribute to the British. Whatever they cultivated, they paid a tribute and disciplined the tribal groups on behalf of the British. So they were just acting like policemen, but they were not that. They lost the authorities they had earlier enjoyed among their people. They were unable to fulfill the traditional functions. Now, what happened to the shifting cultivators? Jhums. The British were uncomfortable with the groups who moved about. You don't think of an event being an historic event. So British were uncomfortable to those who moved. Okay, and what they wanted the tribals to be settled peasants, but then they were not that. They also wanted the regular revenue source for the state. Now, if they move, then during their mobility they will run away. That's the British did not want that. Okay, and fix the revenue demand for the state. Peasants were declared landowners. Others tenants. As you've seen in chapter 2, the tenants were to pay rent to the landowner, who now in turn paid revenue to the British. Now, Jhum cultivators settled. Okay, but then they were also facing problem, right? Because how will they grow crops? Because every crop is having a certain period of time limit you need. So now what is the forest laws and their impact? We'll see that also. So the life of the tribal people was connected to the forests. Okay, tribals, The British extended their control over the forest and declared that the forests were a state property. Some forests were classified as reserve forests. We call them wildlife sanctuary national parks right now also. So in these forests, they were not allowed to perform jhum cultivation, collect fruits, okay, or hunt animals. How were the jhum cultivators to survive in such a situation? They were forced to move in other areas in search of work and livelihood. Colonial officers came up with a solution. They decided that they would give Jhum cultivators small patches of land in the forest and allow them to cultivate. On these conditions, that those who lived in the villages would have to provide labor to the forest department after looking after the forest. So, in many regions, the forest department established forest villages to have a regular supply of cheap labor. Now, the problem with this trade during the 19th century, tribal groups found that the traders and the moneylenders were coming into the forest more often, wanting to buy forest produce, offering cash loans, and asking them to work for wages. Okay, so they did not give, they buy for free. Why will we consider that? Okay, now let us consider one case, that is in the case of silk growers. In the 18th century, the Indian silk was in demand of the European markets. Fine quality silk was produced in India. Okay, as the market expanded, the East India Company officials tried to encourage silk production to meet their growing demands. Harisaribad in the present-day Jharkhand was an area where the Santhal reared. You don't think of any. I think I need to put off the Wi-Fi. Okay. So they were given costumes. This were then to brought to the export of the Bardhaman or Gaya, where they were sold at 5 times the price. Because the Indians were getting poorer, and then they had to search for work because they had to eat also. The tea plantations started coming up and mining became an important industry. Tribals were recruited in large number to work in the tea plantations and coal mines of Jharkhand. Okay. Now a closer look we'll take. Now we'll take a closer look. We'll see who is Birsa Munda. Okay. Now let's see. To the 19th and the 20th century, the tribal groups in different parts of the country rebelled against the statutes in the law, restrictions on their practices, the new taxes they had to pay, and the exploitation by the traders and moneylenders. Okay, now Birsa Munda Birsa was born in the mid 1870s. The son of a poor father, he grew up in the forest of Bonda, grazing sheep, playing the flute, and dancing the local okora. Forced by his poverty, his father had to move to place to place looking for work. As an adolescent, Birsa heard the tales of the Munda uprising of the past and saw the Siddharas and people to revolt. They talked of the golden age where the Munda had been free from oppression of the Dikus. Okay, that means the money lenders, and their ancestral rights and communities were restored. Okay, and now they were revolving and fighting for their land. So they were so this boy went to the local missionary schools and you don't think of sad again. Turned off the Wi-Fi. Still no ad is coming. So this boy went to the missionary school and listened to the sermons of the missionaries. Okay, they now the Christians. This would be possible if they become good Christians and give up bad practices. So Christianity also did not say the Britishers to do all these things, right? So therefore, the Christian they he heard the sermons and they thought that this would be give up brash practices. Later, Birsa also spent time in the prominent Vaishnav preacher. Okay, so he was deeply touched by the ideas of this religion and etc. He urged his tribals to give up drinking liquor, clean their village, stop believing in witchcraft and sorcery. Okay, he told that we must socially arrange ourselves. Okay, so they did not kill their brethren and relatives. They lived honestly. Birsa also wanted people to once again work on their land, settle down, and cultivate their fields. Now, what worried Birsa's officials was the political aim of Birsa's movement. For it wanted to drive out the missionaries, moneylenders, Hindu landlords, and government and set up a Munda Raj with Birsa at its head. So now what Birsa wanted to become the king, but then British would not allow him. So the land policies of the British were destroying the traditional land system. Hindu landlords and moneylenders were taking over their lands and criticizing their traditional culture. Okay, Bisha was released in 1897. He began to touring his village to gather support. He urging them to destroy Ravana. That means the Europeans, and targeted the system of Dikus in European powers. They attacked the police stations and the churches and raided the properties of the Malandindas and the Yamindas. There is a white flag as a symbol of Birsa Raj. In 1900, Birsa died of cholera and the movement was faded out. However, the movement was significant at least in two ways. One, it forced out the colonial governments to introduce laws so that the land of the tribals could be easily taken away by the Dikus. Second, it shows once again that the tribal people had the capacity to protest against the industries and express their anger against hosted in Toronto, Canada. This year, the PDAC convention is. So this was a video.